Howdy folks. So today I have a teardown of a rather interesting retro device under the name MicroFurnace. So I saw this at a thrift store and I picked it up because I've been looking for a sort of retro space heater for a while, and of course summertime is the best time to pick up heating stuff, just like winter is the best time to pick up cooling stuff because people aren't thinking about it. And this checks all of the boxes of the stuff I was looking at, and so I picked it up, and I was just actually started taking the screws out of this, and I thought I'd film this because this thing is actually a little bit more interesting than you might think. Think space heater, it's just some heater wire and a fan. It's not interesting at all. But this is not that. So I did a bit of research on this, and I'll go over what I found as I go over this thing. But it doesn't look, hopefully you can see it. It's very dusty, but it does not look like your average heater. You can't even see any heater wire coils. And, it's all metal. Look at the back. There's a removable filter here. We've got a fan heat switch, and we've got a dial for changing the fan speed. The back rattles a little bit because there's no screws holding it in anymore. If we flip this over to the bottom, that's where most of the data is. And hopefully it doesn't fall apart because of the screws. So the first thing we see here is MicroFurnace. We've got a model here. It's adjustable output up to 5,200 BTUs. This is made in Canada by MicroFurnace Limited, and it's patented. So I looked this up, and there is a company called Pelko, and they registered the trademark of MicroFurnace Limited in Canada in 1985, and they started selling these MicroFurnace space heaters under that name beginning in the beginning of 1986. And so you'll see this 1/86 that's been written on here. This is certainly a date code. And when we get inside, there is another January 86 date code on another part. So this is definitely first of 86 manufacture. And when you look up MicroFurnace, you can see some pictures of these, but they don't have this logo on the front here. They have a different branding. And when you look at the nameplate on the bottom, they're made in Taiwan. So from what I understand from some research, these were originally made in Canada, and then they moved production to Taiwan. So if you have one of the first production run, that's when they're made in Canada, and that's what this logo is from. So this is basically some of the earliest of these models. And as far as documentation, I was able to find an article about these from this time period, from 1986, and it sort of explains the whole concept behind this, in that this is not a resistive heating element. This uses a ceramic heater, which explains this interesting pattern on the front. And the idea behind this is not only is it a ceramic heater, but it's a PTC heater. So the positive temperature coefficient keeps the heating element at a constant temperature. So as the airflow goes down, the power input, or should I say the power that the heater draws, also goes down. So it's self-regulating. And this was touted as a safety feature, basically being that you can't ignite papers and stuff because the heating element just doesn't get, the surface temperature doesn't exceed the flash point of a lot of materials. And that explains how they get this 175 watt to 1500 watt adjustable heat output. Because normally, you get like low, medium, high on most heaters, or usually it's just like a low, high. And it's just because they're switching in different like numbers of coils. Whereas in this case, we have an actual a pot here, and that adjusts the fan speed, and the heater, when you're on heat mode, is just thermally regulated. So this is actually true, and it actually makes this thing way more interesting than just a regular heater. So I thought that was pretty cool. And of course, I love stuff made in Canada because, of course, I am Canadian, and I think that's great. So let's take this apart and see how it's built. And of course, I'm going to get down to all the bare parts because I want to do a full clean on this. Because, of course, since being from '86, this thing is pretty dirty. So it's got 4 screws that hold this back piece on, which I've already removed. This filter here comes out, which of course is going to need to be cleaned. We can see the fan here. There's a screw that holds this sort of fan cover on, and that comes off as well. It's a 3-blade fan, which is interesting. Very smooth. It's got almost no lateral play in the bearings. Just so you know it does spin in the clockwise direction, so air does come from the back and blow at the front. It's not reversed in any weird way. It doesn't move a lot of air, though. I'll power this up once it's all cleaned and stuff. I'm not going to power it up now, but because I don't want it to get nice and hot and stuff. But the fan does not, like, it doesn't blow a massive amount of air, but holy balls does this thing produce an insane amount of heat. I mean, it's 1,500 watts, and it's all going into heat. So I have no doubts about their claims that this can heat a room. The 5200 BTU is easily provable. So I think this thing will work quite nicely. So anyway, now that I've got those out, I'm going to slide the whole thing out from the casing, and that requires 2 hands. So with the inside slid out, you can see the outside is just a piece of metal that's been welded together. And this is the inside here. So there's a piece of, this is the heat-resistant fabric. I don't think this is asbestos. It definitely doesn't look like it. That just goes around the heating element. So we'll just put that to the side. And so this is our assembly. And so we've got our fan here. This would be our ceramic heating element. And then this would just be, I guess, some sort of face plate type thing. They're all bolted together, so we'll take those apart. And then there's a grill on the end. So this is the other date code I immediately saw. So this would be January 27th, 1986. So that's obviously when this was assembled. You know, that's hand drawn on there. So that makes sense. And as far as the fan goes, this side it just states that it is patent pending and U.S. patented. And then if we flip this over to the other side, the fan itself is a Rotron brand made in the United States of America, and so that's kind of neat. And the fan's actually still in pretty good condition. And so on the bottom here, we have our switch. This is just a dual position switch. We've got our mains cord comes in. We've got a little plastic strain relief that'll be fun to get rid of. To open this up, you can see the center is connected directly to one side of the line, and that of course goes to both sides. So when you flip it to fan only mode, which should be this way, that just connects the fan power. So this is the other side of the line, and so that's one terminal of the heating element, and then the fan just taps off. And so there's this little board down here. They're using this is a potentiometer, and they're just using one half of it, just a variable resistor between the wiper and one end, and it goes down into this board. There's 2 active devices. There are 3 terminals. It could be transistors, 2 caps, and that's it. And then for the other side, we just bridge over so the fan also runs, but then it also connects power to the heating element. So that makes sense. So they're not actually controlling the power of the heating element. They're using the self-regulation capabilities to reduce the power of that. They're only adjusting the fan speed, and that makes sense because obviously this is a lot of power, and you'd need something pretty substantial to be able to vary the amount of current into that. So in order to get this apart, there are these bolts that hold this whole stack together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cord out, I'm going to take the switch out, I'm going to take the pot out, and then I'm going to take this rear piece off, and then I'm going to have to undo these bolts so I can separate this sandwich, because I can see there's some metal collars that go into this heating element, which looks kind of interesting, and I think that's probably the most interesting component of this, because this is a relatively early device with a ceramic PTC element. So that will be cool, and it'll also be interesting to take a look at the fan and how they're doing that. I'm assuming this is I'm assuming it's just a triac based. I'm assuming it's just triac based because it is an AC motor, unless those are diode packages, but I highly doubt it. So yeah, so let's just disassemble this more. So I've gotten rid of the strain relief and the knob, which of course actually has a grub screw in it and a little brass insert. It's very nice quality. Taken this out. Of course, I can't get the actual the back plate off completely, but I just need to separate it. It's got a little tiny bit of surface rust on it, but it's not bad at all. Switch is a Leviton 15 amp made in the USA as well. And we can see, of course, the fan here. And one thing that's interesting I'll also note is this, of course, is a 3-blade fan. And when they went to the Taiwanese manufacturing, they switched to a 5-blade fan. And that makes a lot of sense because if you look down, of course, there's a lot of restriction through this. There's very tiny holes through that heating element. And so as a result, you're going to want as much static pressure from the fan as possible. And so having 5 blades is going to be significantly better than 3 because there's all this open gap here that air can escape, basically blow by as the fan spins. So that makes a lot of sense why they why they changed that. Of course, I'm not going to bother to do anything about it. This fan is it's in great condition. Yeah, that's another interesting thing. So I suspect that those probably had more airflow, which is probably the biggest complaint I have about this. Is it doesn't feel like there's a lot of air moving through it, but at the end of the day, as a heater, it doesn't really matter. All the energy that goes into it's going to come out as heat. Might just be a little bit slower. That's all. Yeah, you can kind of see the fine pattern down there. Some of it's clogged with dust, as I can see, but they are very, very tiny holes, and I'm kind of intrigued as to why they did it that way. But anyway, on with the bolts, and we can get this apart. So immediately when I went to take this apart, I kind of noticed a problem. Obviously, there's a nut on this side, and it's for this bolt on the front. But of course, this bolt just has a completely domed head. There's no fastener here, and so of course, if you turn this, it's just going to spin the front. And that of course made me think, how the hell did they assemble this thing? And if you look closely in here, there's actually a spring between this mesh and this plate. And so if you actually compress this mesh down, it actually compresses that spring, and of course it exposes the square shaft on the top of the bolt here. So I suspect they had some two-pronged special tool that was thin enough to get into that gap to hold this in place while they torque the nut down. So I'm going to have to find or make something that I can fit in there, because of course a regular wrench is not going to fit. Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anything made like that before. So about 45 minutes later, I finally have the 4 bolts out, and that was a journey and a half, because unfortunately they used Loctite, some type of thread locker on the ends of all the bolts, and they really did not want to come out. So if you ever want to do this, you need a minimum of 3 wrenches to get this out, because what I ended up doing was using a pair of needle nose pliers to slide in and grip the, of course, the square part of the shaft. But of course, there's no way you can get enough leverage on this. So what I had to do was take another pair of pliers with a lot of leverage and then actually clamp on the other side of those to make this, to grip it strong enough to actually pull these out. And the thread locker fought me all the way, and no solvent I had could dissolve it. So that was quite a fun experience, but it is out now. You can actually see there's hex sort of heads that are formed into the ceramic plate, and they didn't use that in the end, so it's kind of interesting. Another thing that's, I don't think I mentioned this, that ad at the beginning, or that article, I don't really know what you want to call it, it has the suggested retail price of $159.99, and that's $1986. So if you convert that with inflation, and then you convert it to Canadian dollars, that works out to over 500 Canadian dollars in today's money for this. So considering that you can buy a 1500 watt space heater for about $35, that just kind of shows you how expensive this was when it came out. But anyway, this is of course the money shot, right? So I'm taking the top cover off, and I'm doing this for the first time here. So that just lifts off. And okay, so you can see they've got a, looks like some sort of insulator plate here. And they've got, this is the metal tab. This is the one side of the line, and it goes to this metal sheet here. And that's what this groove here is, and they've got 2 of them. This one isn't used for anything. They've got the same thing here, so it's just the way that they've made these. And so there's 4 of these heating discs. So if I can separate this, I probably should have unplugged this. Should I do that? No, let's just slide it out of the way. I don't want to bend this too much. And so these are the ceramic heating elements. They should just lift out of here. Yeah, and there they go. So this is the ceramic heating element, and unfortunately that's quite, I know I'm not staying in shot here, it's not terribly legible on the side of it, and that's really the only marking that's on here. And I can't quite make that out, but you can see the dust that's built up on the back side of this. So that's why I wanted to take this apart and get at this. I don't think there's any other way I could possibly get these out. Maybe there's better markings on one of the other ones. Oh, this one looks a little better. 5187D. I don't recognize. I feel like I feel like that logo is familiar, but I can't quite name it. So you can just see they've done the same thing. There's just another plate on the back, and so that's just how they do it. They're just sandwiching this between the line, and each one of these is self-regulating, and then they've just got two ceramic plates to sort of insulate this from the rest of the chassis. So this also means that the fan should come off on the bottom now, and it does. And oh, interesting, there's some hex nuts. Oh, you know what? That's probably what they originally were going to go for, was these hex nuts, because it looks like two of them have stuck in the ceramic plate. So I suspect that these holes here that are hex shaped were originally for these bolts, but they didn't go for that. And so here is the yeah. So this is a genuine muffin fan. Yeah, Rotron ink. That's very nice. So I'm going to have to take this and all clean it and everything, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all cleaned up, so that you can get an idea what it would look like when it was new. And here it is, several hours later. It's all been reassembled, and it's all clean. It's all got the original color here, and the fan has no more dust in it, and neither do any of the heating pucks. You can see all the way through them. Cleaned all the controls and everything, and well, if anyone ever does this, I don't recommend that you do it the way I did it. See, I made the mistake of separating those two ceramic plates to get the actual PTC heating elements out. I recommend you don't do that, because not only is it such a pain to get this thing back together again, but I ended up chipping all, actually no, 3 of the 4 discs now have small chips in the edges, and I think that's because when I was taking these bolts out, obviously because they're under spring tension, as soon as you release one, I did it in this order. I did it in the star pattern, but still that causes more pressure on one side, and of course that cracks the edges because they're very brittle. It doesn't affect the functionality, but it's something to note. So what I found is that there's actually a set of nuts that sit between the 2 ceramic plates and the fan, which means you can remove, if you're careful, you can actually remove the fan without separating that sandwich. And I don't think you need to take the sandwich out to clean it. There was a lot less dust in the sandwich. The only place where it really was on those pucks, and so you can just use compressed air to get rid of it, and I used a set of tweezers to sort of get some of the really caked on stuff out of there, but now you can see through it really well. So it's about as open as it's ever going to be. So yeah, I don't recommend taking that part apart, but I did get the spring tension back to the way I think it was supposed to be, and everything seems to be okay there. Yeah, everything cleaned up, and I thought I would show you. So I did actually clean the filter, and I'm just waiting for it to dry. It's still a bit damp. Now, I definitely recommend you always use a filter on this, and there's a reason why it's filtered, and that's because of all those little holes. Obviously, you don't want those to clog up, because that's going to drastically reduce the effectiveness of this. So that's why there's a replaceable filter. See, my hands are wet just from touching that. So I'm going to run it quickly just to show you guys what it's like. So I'll just plug it in quickly here. And we'll put it on fan mode because it is hot as hell today. So we will... So this is on maximum. This is all the way up. So it generates, you know, it does generate a small amount of air, but it's not as much as you would sort of expect. But if you turn it down, the beauty of it is it's infinitely adjustable all the way down. So there's no low, medium, high, and you can tell it's actually it's on minimum now, and it's still slowing down. And it gets to the point where it's pretty much silent, and it is still spinning. It is still moving air, but it's very minimal. So it works fine. I can turn it on heat for, you know, like 1 second, and yeah, it's hot. So it works really well, and hopefully this is going to keep me warm in the winter, so I don't have to run my central heating as hard when I'm in a remote room that doesn't have very good ventilation. And yeah, so I thought this thing was kind of neat, and yeah, so I don't think anyone's going to really have this, but I thought you know, for a $500 space heater, I didn't think I could not make a video on this. turned out way better than I expected. When I saw it at the thrift store, I thought, oh, it's just a little space heater. But no, it's way more interesting than that. So anyway, I'm just waffling as usual. So till next time, thanks for watching.